At 2:13 on a Thursday morning, my twin sister whispered, "Marilyn says I'm marrying Wade next month. Dad already gave him my savings." Then somebody started pounding on her bedroom door. Kathy? I sat up so fast I knocked my reading glasses onto the floor. "Who's at the door?" She didn't answer right away. I could hear her breathing through the phone, quick and shallow. A woman's voice came from the other side of the door. "Unlock this door right now." Marilyn. My stepmother had always sounded pleasant in public. Warm, patient, the kind of woman who brought homemade banana bread to funerals and remembered everybody's grandkids. That night she sounded like a landlord collecting rent. "Kathy," I said, keeping my voice low, "I'm calling the police." "No." Her answer came so fast it scared me more than the pounding. "Please don't. She'll tell them I'm having an episode." "What episode?" The doorknob rattled. Then I heard my father in the hallway. "Marilyn, maybe we should let her settle down. Robert, stay out of this." And he did. That was my father's specialty, staying out of things while standing 3 feet away. I got out of bed and pulled on the sweatpants I kept draped over a chair. I lived outside Ann Arbor, Michigan, in a little brick ranch close enough to hear traffic from I-94 when the wind was right. Kathy was almost 3 hours away in Ashford, Ohio, living in the farmhouse where we'd grown up. "Tell me exactly what happened," I said. She tried to apologize first. That was Kathy. You could drop a piano on her foot and she'd apologize for making noise. She told me Marilyn had arranged an engagement dinner for Sunday at Ashford Community Church. Wade Hollister had already bought a ring. My father had transferred $42,000 from Kathy's savings into an account connected to Wade's contracting business. "I told them I don't love him," she whispered. "What did Marilyn say?" "She said love was a luxury for women who knew how to manage their own lives." I closed my eyes. And when I still said no, she slapped me. She twisted my wrist and took my car keys. I gripped the phone harder. "Where's Dad?" "In the hall." Of course he was. "Kathy, listen to me. Go to the window. I'm on the 2nd floor. Can you lock the door?" She removed the lock last year. The pounding stopped. That frightened me more than the noise. Then Marilyn spoke through the door in a calm, almost cheerful voice. "You have 5 minutes. After that, I'm calling Dr. Pennington." Kathy made a small sound. "Who's Dr. Pennington?" "My doctor." "What does that have to do with anything?" "She says he'll tell them I'm not capable of making decisions." There it was. Not just an unwanted marriage, not just stolen money, a threat to erase my sister's legal right to say no. The twins in old movies always seem to know when something is wrong with each other. One drops a glass in Boston because the other one sneezed in Denver. Kathy and I didn't have that kind of magic. We had birthdays, Christmas calls, and occasional lunches at a Cracker Barrel halfway between Michigan and Ohio. She always smiled. She always said she was fine. I believed her because the alternative would have required me to look closer. Our parents divorced when we were 13. Mom moved to Michigan after getting a bookkeeping job with an auto parts supplier. I went with her. Kathy stayed with Dad because she loved her school, her friends, and the old farmhouse. Dad said it would only be for 1 year. 1 year became 31. He married Marilyn 14 months later. At first, Marilyn called Kathy her bonus daughter. She attended school meetings, bought her winter coats, and told people how lucky she was to have inherited such a sweet girl. Then the rules started. Kathy couldn't drive at night, couldn't go to college out of state, couldn't keep her whole paycheck, couldn't call Mom without Marilyn hovering nearby. I had noticed things over the years. Long sleeves during Ohio summers. The way Kathy asked permission before ordering dessert. The way she folded her hands in family photographs as if she'd been instructed where to put them. Once she joked that she wasn't allowed to get sick because Marilyn hated schedule changes. I laughed. That memory still makes me ashamed. "Carrie," Kathy whispered. "I'm here." I didn't want to ruin the good days. "What good days?" "When you and Mom visited, Christmas, birthdays, I didn't want every memory to be about this." My anger softened, but it didn't disappear. Why now? Because they're making me marry him." She said it plainly. No sobbing, no dramatic pause. That made it worse. Marilyn started knocking again. "5 minutes are up." I stood in the dark bedroom with one sock on and one foot bare, thinking faster than I had in years. "Marilyn and Dad are still going to Columbus tomorrow?" "Yes, church leadership retreat. They'll be gone until Sunday." "And Wade?" "He's coming Saturday afternoon." I looked at myself in the dresser mirror. At 44, Kathy and I still looked remarkably alike. Same height, same gray beginning at the temples, same narrow chin from Mom's side of the family. But we moved differently. Kathy had learned to enter a room as if she owed everyone an apology. I had spent 20 years teaching physical therapy patients how to stand without pain and women how to get out of a wrist grab. Then the idea arrived. It was reckless, legally delicate, possibly stupid. Naturally, I said it out loud. "You come here," I told her. "I go there." Silence. "Carrie, we switch for the weekend." "That is insane." "Probably. She'll know. Maybe, but she won't know immediately." I explained the boundaries. I wouldn't sign her name. I wouldn't touch her bank accounts. I wouldn't pretend to be her with police or doctors. I would document what happened and buy her enough time to get legal help. Kathy breathed slowly. Then she said, "What if she hits you?" I almost laughed, but nothing about the moment was funny. "Then she's going to discover you and I had very different extracurricular activities." The next evening, we met in the parking lot of a Meijer outside Toledo. Kathy stepped out of a rideshare carrying one small overnight bag. She wore a beige cardigan buttoned to the throat, although the air was warm. Mom was waiting in my car. The second she saw Kathy's wrist, she covered her mouth. Dark marks circled the skin where fingers had gripped too hard. "Dad never hit me," Kathy said quickly. I looked toward the parking lot lights reflecting off rows of shopping carts. "No," I said. "He just kept opening the door for the person who did." We changed clothes in the Meijer restroom like two middle-aged criminals with sensible shoes. Kathy gave me her glasses, her phone, and a list of household routines. Before I left, I asked, "What do you call Marilyn at home?" Kathy looked down. "Mom," I couldn't bring myself to practice it. I reached the farmhouse at 9:40 that night. The place smelled exactly as I remembered. Lemon furniture polish underneath one of Marilyn's cinnamon candles, sweet enough to make your teeth ache. Kathy's bedroom had no lock. On her desk sat a folder labeled Kathy and Wade, Future Planning. Inside was an engagement schedule, a plan for combining their income, and a typed list called Restricted Items. Car keys, checkbook, phone privileges, passport. Behind it was a yellow sticky note in Marilyn's handwriting. If she cooperates, use the marriage plan. If she refuses, proceed with guardianship. I stood there, wearing my sister's glasses, staring at a system built to make a capable woman disappear. I had driven to Ohio thinking I was stepping into Kathy's life. What I had stepped into was a cage. Marilyn came home 18 hours early. I was standing at the kitchen counter Saturday morning, trying to figure out whether Kathy's coffee maker had some secret handshake, when I heard tires crunch over the gravel drive. A car door slammed. Then another. I looked at the clock above the stove. 8:17. They weren't supposed to be back until Sunday afternoon. I barely had time to slide my phone beneath a folded dish towel before the back door opened. Marilyn entered first, carrying a canvas tote from the church retreat. My father followed with 2 paper cups and the tired expression of a man who had spent most of his life hoping somebody else would make the next decision. Marilyn stopped when she saw me. Not dramatically, she simply became still. Her eyes traveled from my face to my shoulders, then down to the coffee mug in my right hand. "You're up early," she said. I remembered Kathy's warning. Marilyn expected her to call her mom. "Couldn't sleep," I said. I kept the mug in my right hand because switching it suddenly would have looked worse. Robert gave me a cautious smile. "Morning, sweetheart." "Morning, Dad." Something flickered across Marilyn's face. Maybe it was the way I said it. Kathy spoke to him gently, even when she was angry. My voice had edges. The retreat ended early? I asked. It was poorly organized, Marilyn said, removing her coat. Apparently nobody understands that a schedule exists for a reason. That sounded like her. She opened the refrigerator and began inspecting its contents as if I might have held a party overnight. Did Wade stop by? Not yet. He'll be here at 2. I know. Her head turned slightly. Kathy would have said, "Yes, Mom." I added, "You told me." Marilyn smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Breakfast was my first real look at what Kathy's daily life had become. Marilyn fried eggs and buttered toast for herself and Dad. Then she placed half a grapefruit and a small bowl of plain yogurt in front of me. I stared at it. Is the rest of breakfast arriving separately? Dad looked down at his plate. Marilyn folded a napkin beside her fork. You know what Dr. Pennington said about your weight? I was 5'6" and healthy. Kathy was the same height and perhaps 10 pounds lighter. I'm hungry. You're anxious. You confuse the two. She said it with the confidence of someone correcting a child's multiplication. I reached for a slice of toast. Marilyn tapped the table twice with one finger. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Dad kept eating. I put the toast back because I needed to stay in that house longer than 10 minutes. It was one of the hardest things I did all weekend. Not because of the bread. Because Kathy had spent years learning that the safest response to a tapping finger was obedience. After breakfast, Marilyn opened a locked cabinet beside the refrigerator and removed an orange prescription bottle. She shook one pill into a paper medicine cup and set it in front of me with a glass of water. What is it? I asked. She stared at me. Your morning medication. I know that. Which one? You've taken it for years. I looked at the label. Kathy's name, Dr. Pennington's name, a dosage high enough to make me wonder how she had managed to work full-time while taking it. I don't feel like I need it today. That is exactly when people stop taking medication, when it starts working. Dad cleared his throat. Maybe she could skip one. Marilyn turned to him. He studied his coffee. I placed the pill on my tongue, drank the water, and opened my mouth when she told me to. Then I went upstairs, locked myself in the bathroom with my foot braced against the door, and spit the pill into a tissue. There was no lock on Kathy's bedroom, but apparently Marilyn believed a bathroom deserved privacy. Generous woman. I photographed the pill and label before flushing neither. Detective Ortiz didn't exist in my plan yet, but common sense told me not to destroy something that might matter. Back in Kathy's room, I opened the bottom drawer of her nightstand. Inside was a black composition notebook. Marilyn had labeled it Behavioral Record. The entries were dated and written in her tidy block printing. March 8th. Ordered lunch without checking household budget. April 2nd. Called Elaine privately. Became defensive when questioned. May 17th. Refused weekly weigh-in. June 11th. Kept $60 from paycheck. July 1st. Locked bedroom door despite safety agreement. There were dozens more. The notebook disturbed me more than the threat of a wedding. Marilyn had turned normal adult behavior into evidence of illness. At 1:58, a truck pulled into the driveway. Wade Hollister arrived carrying a supermarket bouquet with a bright orange clearance sticker still stuck to the plastic. He was a large man with silver at his temples and a polo shirt tucked too tightly into khaki pants. He looked less like a romantic threat than somebody who might explain your own furnace to you while standing in your living room uninvited. Kathy. He leaned forward as if expecting a kiss. I stepped back and took the flowers. Thanks. He frowned at the lack of enthusiasm, then recovered. Marilyn suggested we talk privately in the den. That was generous too, except she left the door open and moved dishes around in the kitchen without making enough noise to hide the fact that she was listening. Wade sat beside me rather than across from me. I know this is a lot, he said, but you've been alone too long. That makes every decision feel bigger than it is. I'm not alone. You know what I mean. Unfortunately, I did. He opened a ring box. The diamond was modest, but the setting was flashy. I spoke to Pastor Holloway. Sunday will be simple, just family and close friends. I don't want to marry you. He sighed like I had objected to the color of a bathroom tile. "Kathy, Marilyn explained your fears. You don't have to carry everything by yourself anymore." "What happens to my job?" "You won't need it." "My savings?" "We'll combine things." "And the farmhouse?" His expression changed, barely. "Once the paperwork is settled, your dad can relax. The property stays in the family. You don't need to worry about every detail." I looked at him. "Whose family?" He closed the ring box. "You're getting worked up." "No, I asked a question." He reached for my left hand. I pulled it back. His fingers closed around my wrist. "Don't embarrass Marilyn after everything she's done for you." My body reacted before my mind did. I turned my wrist toward the gap between his thumb and fingers, stepped back, and broke the grip. My hip struck the corner of an end table hard enough to send pain down my leg. Real self-defense rarely looks graceful. Mostly you escape while bumping into furniture. Wade stared at his empty hand. "Where did you learn that?" "Internet." His face hardened. "You don't need that kind of influence." From the kitchen, a plate stopped clattering. Marilyn had heard everything. Dinner was pot roast, mashed potatoes, and green beans, cooked until they had lost the will to live. Marilyn asked me questions about childhood. Which teacher had caught me smoking behind the gym? What color bicycle had Dad bought me in 5th grade? Then she mentioned a dog named Pepper biting me when I was 10. I nodded too quickly. "I remember." Marilyn set down her fork. We had never owned a dog named Pepper. The question had been a trap. Later, she followed me upstairs and held out her hand. "Phone." "No." Her face remained calm. "Excuse me?" I said no. She stepped forward and swung her hand toward my cheek. I caught her wrist. Not hard, just fast. Dad stood in the hallway behind her, his mouth slightly open. Marilyn looked down at my hand, then back at my face. I released her immediately. "Don't touch me again." For 1 second, I saw something sharp and calculating behind her eyes. Then she smiled. "You've changed." An hour later, Darla Finch arrived carrying a broccoli casserole and enough artificial white roses to decorate a small funeral. She talked without needing encouragement. By the time she finished her first cup of coffee, I knew Marilyn had told the church Kathy's condition was worsening, and Wade had agreed to take responsibility. Darla leaned toward me. "Your mother showed us some of the property papers at the luncheon Wednesday." "Did she?" "Oh, honey, half the fellowship hall saw them. Marilyn loves paperwork more than she loves people." She laughed at her own joke. I didn't. That night, I found the guardianship petition in a filing cabinet inside Kathy's room. Attached was a letter from Dr. Pennington stating Kathy could not manage money, medication, housing, or personal relationships. The letter was dated 3 weeks before the episode Marilyn claimed had triggered it. My hands shook while I photographed every page. The wedding wasn't the real threat. The wedding was Plan A. If Kathy refused, Marilyn intended to erase her on paper. I slept maybe 2 hours, not because I was afraid Marilyn would come into Kathy's room, because I knew she might not. People like Marilyn didn't waste energy checking every door every night. They trained other people to lose sleep for them. By Sunday morning, I understood something that still bothers me. Kathy hadn't been living with constant screaming. She'd been living with constant anticipation. That was worse. You start policing yourself before your abuser even walks into the room. Around 7, Marilyn was already vacuuming downstairs. Not because the farmhouse needed it, because she wanted everyone awake. I waited until she left for church to help decorate the fellowship hall. The second her SUV disappeared down the gravel driveway, I grabbed my keys and drove 5 miles to a Marathon gas station. I bought the worst coffee in Ohio, locked myself inside the restroom, and called the Ashford County Sheriff's Office. 5 minutes later, Detective Lena Ortiz called me back. She sounded practical, calm, the kind of person who had heard every family disaster imaginable. "I'm Detective Ortiz. My name is Caroline Mercer. I understand you're not the daughter currently living in the farmhouse." "No." "So let's start with something simple." She paused. Are you impersonating your sister to steal money or sign legal documents? No. Good. That sounded encouraging. Then she added, because if you are, I'm going to have 2 investigations instead of 1. Fair enough. I told her everything. The marriage, the money, the medication, the notebook, the guardianship petition. She interrupted only once. Have you signed anything? No. Accessed your sister's bank account? No. Removed original documents? No. Good. Another pause. I need you to hear something very clearly, Miss Mercer. I'm listening. I believe coercive control is real. She chose those words carefully. I've seen adults lose control of their own lives because somebody slowly convinced everyone else they couldn't make decisions. She took a breath. But if you start breaking laws trying to fix this, you may damage your sister's case. I understand. Photograph what you can legally see. I have. Record conversations you're part of. I have. Don't provoke anyone. I won't. And if someone becomes violent, I'm leaving. No, she corrected me immediately. You're protecting yourself. There was a difference. I appreciated that. Before hanging up, she gave me one final piece of advice. Fear makes people rush. I know. Don't rush. When I walked back outside, the coffee had already gone cold. I took 1 sip anyway. Still terrible. Some things are dependable. On the drive back, I called the attorney Elaine had found Saturday night. Rachel Monroe practiced family law in Toledo. Unlike television lawyers, she didn't sound dramatic. She sounded tired, which somehow made me trust her more. She explained that Kathy herself, not me, had already requested copies of her own banking records from Michigan. That mattered. Everything needed to come from Kathy whenever possible. Emergency filings can wait until tomorrow morning, Rachel said. But if Marilyn tries to force a marriage ceremony today? I'm already coordinating with law enforcement. Rachel was quiet for a second. Good. Then she added something I never forgot. Your sister has spent 18 years having people make decisions for her. I know. So whatever happens today, she let the sentence hang. Let her make the important ones. When I returned to the farmhouse, Dad was sitting alone in the barn. He was polishing an old fishing reel that hadn't seen water in years. He looked older than 70. Not physically, spiritually. He heard me walking across the concrete floor. You can stop pretending. I froze. He didn't look up. I know you're Carrie. I waited. When? The slap. He finally raised his eyes. Kathy never blocks. Neither of us spoke. Dust floated through sunlight coming between the wooden boards. I should have known sooner, he said quietly. I've been telling myself that for 18 years. That surprised me. Not because he admitted guilt, because he admitted it without being asked. I thought, he rubbed his forehead, I thought Marilyn was strict. I said nothing. I thought Kathy needed structure. Still nothing. I thought, his voice broke, I thought if I kept the peace, eventually everything would calm down. I looked around the barn. There were tools organized by size, extension cords rolled neatly. Everything had its place. Except the truth. Did you know she hit Kathy? He swallowed. I knew she got rough sometimes. I stared at him. That's what cowards call violence when they're sitting beside the person doing it. He flinched. Good, he deserved to. He reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. The safe combination. I didn't take it immediately. Why? Because I finally looked at your sister yesterday. His eyes filled. I mean, really looked. I accepted the paper. Then he handed me something else. An old envelope. My handwriting. I recognized it before opening it. I'd written it when I was 13. Dear Dad, please don't let us become different families. We're twins. We're supposed to stay together. Love, Carrie. I folded it again, carefully. I kept that, he whispered. I know. I read it every birthday. I looked him straight in the eye. And every year you still chose Marilyn. He couldn't answer. The safe sat behind winter coats in the bedroom closet. I entered the combination. Inside wasn't treasure, it was paperwork. Organized, labeled, neat, exactly the way Marilyn liked everything. Instead of taking originals, I photographed each section. There were really only 3 stories hiding inside. Money, control, lies, money, records showing Kathy hadn't controlled her own income in years, the $42,000 transfer. Several checks from Wade's company written to Marilyn. Control, Kathy's passport, her car keys, a draft power of attorney, the guardianship petition, property documents, lies, Marilyn's handwritten instructions, the recordings already on my phone. Everything pointed in the same direction, not one bad day, 18 years of planning. I put every paper back exactly where I'd found it. As I closed the safe, Dad whispered, "I'll tell the truth tomorrow." I looked at him. "You will?" "I'll stand beside Kathy." For the first time all weekend, I believed him. That turned out to be my biggest mistake. I called Kathy from the backyard. "We're almost there." "I don't want almost." "I know. I want this over." I explained the plan. Rachel, Detective Ortiz, the evidence, the church. Silence. Then Kathy asked quietly, "So you've already decided I'm going?" I blinked. You thought you'd protect me." "Yes." "Carrie," her voice wasn't angry. It was tired. "That's what everybody says right before they start making my choices." The words hit harder than Marilyn's slap ever could have. I realized something ugly. I had spent 48 hours trying to save Kathy, without once asking what she wanted. "I'm sorry." She didn't answer. So I asked the question I should have asked first. "What do you want?" A long silence. Finally, "I want to go." "You do?" "Yes. But I decide what I say." "Of course." "You don't tell everyone every embarrassing thing that's happened." "I won't. I'll speak for myself." I smiled despite everything. "Good." She laughed softly. The first real laugh I'd heard from her in days. "I think I'm terrified." "So am I." "Maybe that's okay." "Maybe." We hung up. For the first time since Thursday morning, this wasn't my rescue mission anymore. It was hers. Around 4 that afternoon, Dad found me loading groceries into the refrigerator. His face had turned gray. "What happened?" He couldn't meet my eyes. "I told Marilyn." My stomach dropped. "What?" "She said." He rubbed his hands together. "She said she'd leave. And? I couldn't." He looked like a little boy. "I couldn't lose another wife." I closed the refrigerator door, slowly. "You already lost your daughter." He started crying. I walked away. There wasn't anything left to say. 10 minutes later, Marilyn appeared in Kathy's bedroom doorway. She closed the door behind her, locked it, then smiled. "I knew Friday night." Every muscle in my body tightened. "You pour coffee with the wrong hand." She began counting on her fingers. "You remembered a dog we never owned. You stand like someone expecting a fight. And," she tilted her head, "you look at Robert with anger." She smiled wider. Kathy only ever looked at him with disappointment. I said nothing. I could have exposed you immediately. "Why didn't you?" She laughed. "I wanted to see how much you knew." She stepped closer. "And now I know." She already knew Kathy was in Michigan. She knew we'd contacted someone. She knew we'd found documents. Then she delivered the final surprise. "I invited your mother." I stared at her. "And Kathy." My heart pounded. "I told them Robert had a medical emergency." "You lied." "Naturally." She smoothed the sleeve of her blouse. "Tomorrow won't be an engagement dinner." "What will it be?" She smiled. "A room full of people watching 2 unstable daughters destroy their father." She leaned closer. "I've spent 18 years teaching this town who to believe." Then she opened the door. "I'll see you at church." I stood alone in Kathy's bedroom. The trap hadn't been built for us. It had been built years ago. Tomorrow we were simply walking into it. By 6 o'clock Sunday evening, Ashford Community Church looked exactly the way I remembered from childhood. White clapboard walls, freshly mowed grass, a row of American flags by the entrance. The fellowship hall smelled like coffee, baked ham, and every casserole recipe ever handed down in the Midwest. If you closed your eyes, it felt like every church potluck I'd attended growing up. Open them, and you saw the stage Marilyn had built, a banner stretched across the far wall. A new beginning for Kathy and Wade. There were white flowers on every table, plastic champagne glasses, little wrapped chocolates tied with silver ribbon. Someone had even put together a slideshow of Kathy through the years. Every photograph showed her smiling. Not one showed the woman I had met in the Meijer parking lot. I arrived 10 minutes early with Rachel Monroe. Detective Ortiz had instructed us not to enter together. She wanted Marilyn to feel comfortable. Comfortable people made mistakes. Rachel squeezed my arm. Remember. I know. This isn't your speech. I nodded. It belongs to Kathy. That was harder than I expected. For 2 days, I'd been gathering evidence, making calls, building plans. Every instinct I had wanted to step in front of my sister and keep her safe. Instead, I had to trust her. Inside the fellowship hall, Marilyn floated from table to table greeting guests. If you didn't know her, you'd think she was hosting the happiest evening of her life. She hugged people. She laughed. She adjusted flower arrangements. She thanked volunteers for bringing desserts. My father stood beside the coffee urn, pouring cups nobody seemed to want. He looked smaller than I remembered. Darla Finch spotted me first. She nearly waved, then remembered I wasn't supposed to be there. She blinked twice and pretended to become fascinated by a bowl of potato salad. Good recovery, Darla. Not great, but good. At exactly 6:30, Pastor Jim Holloway welcomed everyone. We're gathered tonight to celebrate family. Marilyn stepped forward before he finished. Naturally, she never enjoyed sharing microphones. She smiled at the room. I know many of you have heard concerning rumors about Kathy recently. The room became quiet. Some of those rumors are true. She lowered her eyes just enough to suggest heartbreak. My stepdaughter has been struggling emotionally. A few people nodded sympathetically. She has become vulnerable to manipulation. There it was. She wasn't defending herself. She was writing the opening paragraph of our obituary. Marilyn sighed dramatically. My former husband's ex-wife. She actually paused to smile politely. And Kathy's twin sister have convinced her that everyone who loves her is somehow abusing her. She shook her head sadly. It breaks my heart. Mine nearly exploded, she continued. They even convinced Caroline to impersonate Kathy. A ripple moved through the room. People whispered. Some looked confused, others looked fascinated. One elderly man removed his hearing aids and cleaned them. Honestly, I respected that. If someone announced my daughter had been replaced by her twin, I'd probably want better reception too. Marilyn placed one hand on Wade's arm. This wonderful man has shown unbelievable patience. Wade nodded solemnly. I still intend to marry Kathy. He looked around the room. I made a promise. No, you made a business proposal. You just wrapped it in church language. Marilyn continued. Unfortunately, Carrie has frightened Kathy into believing she needs to run away. She sighed again. But tonight, she smiled, I hope my family can begin healing. Healing. Amazing how often that word gets used by people demanding someone else surrender. Rachel leaned toward me. Ready? I looked toward the front doors. No. Good. She smiled faintly. That means you're thinking. Then the doors opened. Everyone turned. Kathy walked inside wearing a navy blue cardigan, jeans, and the glasses she'd worn almost every day for 15 years. She wasn't dressed like a bride. She looked like herself, or maybe like herself for the first time. The room froze. Marilyn smiled. Exactly as expected. Then another door opened. I stepped into the fellowship hall. Same cardigan, same glasses, same hair, same face. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. Darla's deviled egg slid off her paper plate. It landed upside down. She stared at it. then looked back at us. "Lord have mercy," she whispered. "There are 2 of them." Pastor Holloway blinked so many times I worried about his contact lenses. Wade's mouth actually fell open. One little boy tugged on his grandmother's sleeve. "Grandma." "What? Did they copy her?" His grandmother whispered, "Hush." Reasonable advice. Nobody in that room understood what they were seeing. Marilyn recovered first. Of course she did. She pointed directly at me. "There!" She almost sounded relieved. "That's Caroline." Nobody responded. Then she pointed at Kathy. "And that's my poor confused daughter." Still silence, because now people had a problem. For 18 years, Marilyn had told everyone Kathy couldn't think clearly. Yet the woman standing beside me looked perfectly calm. Kathy walked toward the microphone. Her hands trembled slightly. I knew that shake. Not weakness, adrenaline. Marilyn stepped forward. "I don't think that's a good idea." Kathy looked at her. "You've spoken for me for 18 years. She swallowed. "You can wait 5 minutes." Nobody applauded, nobody interrupted. The silence itself became permission. Kathy picked up the microphone. "I know many of you." Her voice shook. "So I'm embarrassed that you're hearing this here." She looked around the room. "I stayed quiet because I believed keeping my family together mattered more than telling the truth." She paused. "I was wrong." You could hear forks being set down, coffee cups touching tables, little sounds. The sounds people make when they realize dinner has become something else. My wages were taken. My medication was controlled. My passport disappeared. I wasn't allowed to make ordinary decisions. She looked toward Wade. "When I refused to marry him," she breathed slowly, "Marilyn threatened to have me declared legally incompetent." Someone gasped. Not dramatically, just one sharp breath. Exactly the kind people make when something suddenly becomes real. Marilyn laughed, actually laughed. "Oh, sweetheart," she shook her head. "Listen to yourself." Then she looked at everyone else. "These aren't her words," she pointed at me. She memorized whatever her sister told her. Kathy didn't answer. Marilyn walked closer. "I've spent 18 years taking care of you." Another step. "You've never been able to manage your emotions." Closer. "You need help." She reached toward the microphone. Kathy stepped backward. "Don't touch me." Marilyn ignored her. "Kathy, don't." Another step. Then Marilyn shoved her shoulder. Not hard, just enough, but she'd forgotten something. There were 30 witnesses now. I moved before I thought, not toward Marilyn, toward Kathy. I caught Marilyn's forearm, turned slightly, and redirected her sideways. No strike, no throw, no pain, just enough force to stop her from reaching my sister again. I released her immediately. "I'm letting go." I stepped back. "You are not touching either of us again." The room stayed perfectly still. Then Detective Ortiz spoke from the back of the hall. "Mrs. Mercer?" Every head turned. She walked forward with 2 uniformed deputies. "We've seen enough." For the first time that evening, Marilyn looked surprised. Rachel Monroe opened a folder. "Before anyone leaves," she spoke clearly, "I'd like to explain 3 things." She didn't bury people in legal language. She kept it simple. Money. She described the missing wages, the $42,000, the payments connected to Wade. Control. She described the passport, the keys, the guardianship papers, the forged power of attorney. Lies. She played a short recording. Wade's voice filled the room. "Once the paperwork is settled, your dad can relax." Then another, Dad's voice. I knew she got rough sometimes. He closed his eyes. Rachel looked toward the guests. "These aren't opinions. They're documents. They're recordings. They're facts." Marilyn opened her mouth. "I can explain." "I can." Everyone turned toward Darla. She was holding her phone. "I took pictures at the luncheon." She sounded almost apologetic. "You told us how proud you were of those property papers." She walked forward. "The date's right here." Rachel compared it with Kathy's medical records. Kathy had been in Michigan that afternoon. The room erupted into whispers. Darla looked at Marilyn. "I thought you wanted us to admire your planning." Marilyn's face lost color. She turned toward Dad. "Robert." He didn't move. "Say something." He stared at the floor. "Robert." Slowly, he looked at Kathy, then at me. Finally. "I knew," his voice cracked. "I knew she was hurting my daughter." The room became silent again. I kept telling myself it wasn't that bad. He wiped his eyes. I was afraid she'd leave. He nodded toward Marilyn. "So," he swallowed, "I let my daughter believe I already had." Kathy didn't cry. She simply looked at him. "Thank you for telling the truth." A long pause. "It doesn't erase anything." Detective Ortiz stepped beside Marilyn. "Mrs. Mercer," she nodded toward the door. "We need to speak with you." Marilyn looked around the fellowship hall. Nobody moved to help her. Nobody defended her, not even Wade. In fact, he quietly took one step away from her. That told me everything I ever needed to know about him. As Marilyn passed Rachel, my sister spoke. "1 second." Rachel handed Kathy a large evidence envelope. Inside was her passport. Kathy held it for a moment, then slipped it into her purse herself. Marilyn sneered. "You'll come crawling back." Kathy smiled. Maybe the first genuine smile I'd seen all weekend. "Maybe I'll make mistakes." She looked directly at Marilyn. "They'll finally be mine." I watched my sister walk out of that fellowship hall carrying one purse and her own future. For the first time in 18 years, nobody walked in front of her. People love to tell you that freedom feels wonderful. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it feels like standing in the cereal aisle for 15 minutes because nobody has asked what you want in almost 20 years. Kathy moved into a one-bedroom apartment outside Ann Arbor 3 weeks after the church dinner. Nothing fancy. Second floor, beige carpet, a tiny balcony overlooking a parking lot where somebody was always washing the same blue pickup truck. Mom found it through a retired coworker whose daughter had just gotten married. The apartment smelled like fresh paint and new beginnings. Neither one lasts forever. The first night, Kathy called me at 11. "I think somebody's outside." I grabbed my keys. "I'm coming." When I arrived, she opened the door with both locks still engaged. "It was the upstairs neighbor." She looked embarrassed. "He came home from work." We both stood there for a second. Then we laughed, not because it was funny, because our bodies didn't know what else to do after 3 days of living on adrenaline. Recovery wasn't dramatic, it was oddly ordinary. The first grocery trip took nearly 2 hours. Kathy picked up a loaf of bread, put it back, picked up another, put that back too. Finally, she looked at me. "Which one should I buy?" I almost answered. Then I remembered Rachel Monroe's words. "Let her make the important ones." I smiled. "I don't know," she blinked. "You've always liked sourdough." "I know." "But this isn't my sandwich." She stared at the shelves for another minute before putting a loaf of wheat bread into the cart. You would have thought she'd climbed Mount Everest. That loaf of bread nearly made me cry. The little victories were everywhere. She chose her own shampoo. She bought flowers because she liked yellow daisies. She turned her phone off one afternoon just because she wanted a nap. No one punished her. Every time something ordinary happened, she looked almost surprised. Some habits took longer. If someone knocked unexpectedly, she froze. If a voicemail sounded serious, she'd replay it 3 or 4 times before listening all the way through. She still apologized to cashiers when they scanned her groceries too slowly. Trauma has strange leftovers. About a month later, I made my biggest mistake. I showed up carrying a folder. Inside were therapist recommendations, budget worksheets, a checklist for changing passwords, emergency contacts, a calendar I'd color-coded. I was proud of it. Kathy wasn't. She looked at the folder, then at me. Finally, she asked quietly, "Do you want to know what 18 years felt like?" I sat down. She didn't raise her voice. That made every word heavier. "You got to spend 4 days pretending to be me." I nodded. I spent 18 years trying to remember who I was before Marilyn started making every decision. She pushed the folder toward me. "You keep giving me better choices." Another pause. But you're still choosing. The room became very quiet. I wanted to explain. I wanted to say I was only trying to help. Instead, I listened. She took a slow breath. I know you love me. I do. I know, she smiled sadly. But I don't need another person organizing my life. Those words hurt, not because they were unfair, because they were true. I gathered the papers without saying anything. I'll leave, she nodded. I think that's best today. We didn't speak for 4 days. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Then, one Saturday afternoon, my phone rang. Kathy? Bring coffee. That's all? And maybe donuts. What kind? She laughed. The kind you don't pick. When I arrived, she opened the door wearing jeans covered with little spots of paint. She had decided to repaint the bedroom by herself. It looked terrible. There were streaks on the ceiling. Blue fingerprints on the baseboards. One roller tray had somehow ended up inside the bathtub. It looks awful, she admitted. It really does. We both laughed. Then she said something I'll never forget. I made every one of those mistakes. She looked around proudly. And nobody yelled. So I sat on the living room floor eating maple donuts while she talked about paint samples for nearly an hour. I didn't offer advice. She never asked for any. Mom was changing, too. One afternoon, she invited Kathy over for lunch. Halfway through homemade chicken noodle soup, Mom put down her spoon. I owe you an apology. Kathy waited. Every time you told me you were fine. Mom looked out the kitchen window. I let myself feel relieved. Her voice became quieter. A mother is supposed to ask one more question. Neither of them cried. They simply reached across the table and held hands. Some relationships heal with speeches. Others heal because somebody finally tells the truth. Dad called almost every week. The first few times, Kathy ignored him. Eventually, she agreed to one scheduled phone call each month. She set the rules herself. No blaming Marilyn, no asking for money, no surprise visits, no expecting Kathy to comfort him because he felt guilty. The first time he started saying how lonely he was, Kathy interrupted him gently. I'm sorry you're lonely. Silence. But I'm not responsible for fixing that. He accepted it. For once in his life, he accepted a boundary. As for Marilyn, she accepted a plea agreement, restitution, probation, mandatory counseling, a permanent no-contact order with Kathy. Dr. Pennington eventually resigned while facing investigations into his documentation and professional conduct. Wade tried telling everyone he'd been manipulated. Funny how quickly brave men discover their victims when consequences arrive. Marilyn lost something that mattered even more than money. She lost her audience. The church removed her from every committee. At the next fellowship potluck, nobody saved her favorite seat near the dessert table. Ashford isn't a large town. People notice empty chairs. Then there was Darla. About 2 months later, she appeared at my self-defense class, carrying a giant floral gym bag. I'd like to sign up. You know this class involves exercise? She sighed dramatically. I was hoping we'd vote on that. The first lesson involved simple balance drills. 5 minutes later, she announced, I've survived 3 church fundraising committees. My knees deserve a medal. By the end of class, she was everybody's favorite student. Mostly because she complained louder than anyone else. 3 months after everything happened, Kathy and I stopped at a little diner outside Ann Arbor after visiting a local art fair. The waitress smiled. What can I get you with breakfast? She looked at Kathy. Toast or biscuits? Without thinking, Kathy started to say, whatever's ES. She stopped, actually looked at the menu, thought about it, then smiled. Biscuits! The waitress nodded. You got it. That was all. No applause, no inspirational music, just biscuits. But I understood exactly what I'd witnessed. The choice wasn't important. The freedom to make it was. Looking back now, people sometimes ask if I got revenge on Marilyn. They're asking the wrong question. For a long time, I thought revenge meant making someone hurt as much as they'd hurt you. I don't believe that anymore. The most satisfying moment wasn't watching Marilyn leave that church with detectives beside her. It was watching my sister stand in a diner, order exactly what she wanted, and never glance at anyone for permission. If you've ever watched someone slowly rebuild a life after years of being controlled, you know the smallest choices can become the biggest victories. Thank you for spending this time with me. I hope this story reminds you that healthy love leaves room for a voice, a boundary, and the freedom to choose.